Hi, my name is ZAN HITCHENS, and I am an incoming junior majoring in Materials Engineering and Physics at University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. During this OREU program, I've been working alongside Professor Benzerga on an investigation of second-phase particles as sites for void nucleation and growth. So, what is the purpose of this study? In recent years, the field of high-performance metallic alloys has advanced dramatically in terms of elastic strength. Accompanying this increase in strength, however, is a corresponding decrease in tensile ductility and toughness. And so while alloy development has led to materials that are increasingly resistant to applied loads, these materials are also more brittle and thus more susceptible to catastrophic failure. Thus, there is an interest in developing alloys that show an increase in toughness without compromising alloy strength. In order to do this, we must understand the mechanism behind the fracture of high-performance alloys. Most alloys fracture by a process known as dimpled rupture. This can be split into three phases: void nucleation, void growth, and void coalescence. Previous work has found that, oftentimes, the nucleation of these voids happen at the site of intermetallic impurities within a metal, also known as second-phase particles. Usually formed intentionally, these give the material strength by impeding the movement of dislocations through said material. For example, the addition of carbon within iron creates carbide second-phase particles, which are responsible for strengthening iron into what we know as steel. However, some larger second-phase particles, such as oxides and sulfides, serve to actually weaken an alloy by acting as sites for void nucleation and starting the process of dimpled rupture. By characterizing these particles, we can find correlations between their parameters and void nucleation and coalescence. My project consisted of two phases: a literature survey and a dislocation dynamic simulation. In the first portion, I built a database out of previously published work, focusing on the size, spacing, shape, and volume fraction of second-phase inclusions in a wide variety of alloys. Using the first three parameters, we can find correlations in void nucleation, while the spacing of said particles will help us find correlations in the void coalescence step. I also began to implement a dislocation dynamic simulation, which will allow me to investigate the effect of these inclusion size on the competing processes of plastic relaxation and stress concentration, both of which contribute to void nucleation. During this portion of my research paper, I have gone through around 200 papers, from which I have managed to find data on 36 different alloys, with 45 inclusion types between them. In my survey, there seems to be three major classes of material for which data is available: steel, aluminum alloys, and magnesium alloys. Collecting this data has been challenging for multiple reasons. For one, lots of older data has not been digitized, meaning that while a plot like the one on the right is provided, the numerical values of the points are not. Thus, the distribution itself cannot be accessed. Also, authors oftentimes do not actually measure inclusion spacing data, instead deriving a value using other parameters and models that make certain assumptions, such as the uniform distribution of particles. Furthermore, models show dramatic spacing differences when measured volumetrically, as opposed to using the cross-section of a sample and measuring it two-dimensionally. Thus, this has to be accounted for when collecting data. Moving on to the second phase of my project, to understand what a dislocation dynamic is, we first must define what a dislocation is. A dislocation is a defect within a material characterized by a misalignment of atoms within a crystal lattice. Dislocations often form as a response to an applied stress and will propagate through a material, creating what we know as plastic strain. Thus, dislocation lines are essential in characterizing material properties within the plastic regime. Dislocation dynamics aims to take advantage of that. It models and tracks dislocation lines throughout a simulated material, which then can be used to draw a wide variety of conclusions regarding a material and its properties. The advantages of this class of simulation are that they allow you to simulate plastic deformation of materials with non-uniform stress, and are much less computationally rigorous than attempting to simulate every atom of a material, which allows a much larger simulated volume on the order of microns. However, my project did not focus on dislocations themselves, but rather the stress fields that result from them. As part of my project, I attempted to use these dislocation dynamic simulations to find the effect that the size of an inclusion had on the stress concentrations within a material. Because voids nucleate when a localized stress reaches a certain level, and plastic relaxation leads to a reduction in internalized stress, the results from this are also related to these two processes. Within the scripts I was given, I had to set inclusion and cell size, the number of active slip planes, nucleation sites, obstacles to dislocation flow, as well as strain rate. It is important to keep all these parameters in sync so that the only variable being tested is the size of the inclusion. However, this need leads to where I am now and what work needs to be done in the future. Each iteration of the simulation doubles the size of all cell parameters, quadrupling the total area. Thus, the parameters become very large very quickly and result in overcrowding along the slip planes. Larger simulations would often fail very quickly with no produced data. In the future, these simulations need to become smaller. I would like to thank the OREU program at Texas A&M University, as well as CREDS at Texas A&M for sponsoring this work. I would also like to thank Professor Amin Benzerga and Hari Rajendran for their guidance and assistance. Thank you all for watching, and have a nice day.